Hello again. Today I'd like to share one of my favorite passages from my new book that just came out a few weeks ago. It's called The Holy Remnant, Warnings from the Past. And why I like this passage in the book so much is because I think it helps correct some recent theological errors that have arisen in an attempt to try to correctly divide between those parts of sanctification that are actually crisis aspects versus those that are just part of the process. And I think this passage, as far as I am aware of in the Wesleyan reading that I have done, I think it best captures which parts are crisis and which parts are actually process aspects of holiness. This is all discussed under a chapter that's talking about the work of Dunning and Wynkoop, and it begins that way, saying that they deny the instantaneous act of faith. That's the title of the section. Dunning, as had Wynkoop before him, again denies the necessity of a crisis or instantaneous work of entire sanctification when he argues against Wesley's main point he had used in supporting it, that one does not need to exercise an act of appropriating faith to receive the second work of grace. Wynkoop writes, quote, "One does not believe for justification and then later believe for sanctification, but he begins to trust in Christ, a personal relationship by which he appropriates God's grace and begins the life of holiness." Dunning likewise states, "One does not exercise faith as an isolated event, but begins what is a walk of faith marked by continuing dependence upon the mercy and grace of God." Just prior to this, he footnotes the reverse of this statement made by Wesley. He likewise contradicts this point he makes here in his discussion of justification, saying that this work is in fact, quote, "received in a moment of existential faith," unquote. Wesley contrarily stated, quote, "that this faith to receive entire sanctification and consequently the salvation which it brings is spoken of as given in an instant." And using faith to substantiate his claim for the instantaneousness of entire sanctification, Wesley says, "As to manner, I believe this perfection is always wrought in the soul by its simple act of faith, consequently in an instant." Two of the further criticisms of the traditional doctrine of holiness added to Wynkoop's lists help reveal the hidden error behind her understanding of the crisis of entire sanctification. She refers to it as simply the ordered methodology of human appropriation and a psychological syndrome. So she's basically approaching this from a one side, from man's side, focusing instead of on the supernatural origin of sanctification. Dunning similarly defines it as the human response to the revealed divine will. First of all, according to Wesley, this act of faith is not merely man's work, either as a newly gained level of human psychological awareness or a typical but varied response to the offers of grace. In addition to this aspect of it, and more integral to its definition, it is of supernatural origin. This we established in the first volume, and I'm referencing my first book entitled The Great Privilege of All Believers, The Wesleyan Doctrine of No Sin. Secondly, the crisis as a whole is most definitely not a work of man. Both these things are clearly implied in Wynkoop's statements. The absurdity of Dunning's definition of this act of faith as only a human response plays out later when he states that this faith, as a condition of receiving it, quote, "answers to the instantaneousness of entire sanctification." Even more off from Wesley, Wynkoop denies that faith is power added to the sinner. It must be both the condition and, more decidedly, the instrument of God's instantaneous working. Ian Bounds, 1835 to 1913, one of the most written upon and seriously devoted to the subject of prayer in the Methodist ranks, best followed Wesley when defining and speaking of the origin of this living faith in his classic work, The Necessity of Prayer.